I'm Karen, and you're listening to the Bacon Bits and Bytes podcast. This is where a bit of business and a bite of technology come together. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bacon Bits and Bytes podcast. So I'm very excited today to have my guest, Beth Woodward. So I'm just going to give a little brief bio about her before we get started. So hunting things of beauty has always been a deep passion of Beth, but where she really excels is in the creation and sharing of beautiful things that represent your brand and business. Beth was nominated for Young Entrepreneur of the Year through the Oakville Awards of Business Excellence, and she has won 4 Reader's Choice Awards in the past 2 years. She is happy to help with all your graphic design or small business branding. She also designs and print collateral for corporate clients as well as small business owners and has developed a solid love of watching brands market their business through unique methods. So the crazier, the better. Wow. Welcome, Beth. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So I just wanted to also talk to the listeners about how we met. So I believe it was through the Facebook group, Small Business Owners of Southern Ontario. So she is one of the admins of the group, and she has grown it into quite a very large online community. So not only is it a very large community, it's a very engaged community. And to be honest, I'm in a lot of Facebook groups, and I think it's actually one of the few Facebook groups where there's a lot of engagement and conversation going on.
Yeah, we're very proud of our members for that. Like, we started when there's maybe under 100 of us, and it was originally Burlington, and then it kind of exploded. I took it over about 2 years ago in July, and when I took it over, we were at 600, and I took it over about 2 years ago in July, and when I took it over, we were at 600, and we're now at 2,700.
That is amazing.
Always going. But we do have a great engagement rate, and everybody's really involved with helping support everybody as they grow. And a big part of it too, I think, is we don't allow self-promotion. So the only people who are really in there and engaging are the ones who are in it for the aspect of community growth and actually sharing experiences. Mm-hmm. So it makes it a lot more valuable.
Okay, so let's get into the questions. So these days, we know there's a lot of free design tools available for small business owners, such as Canva. So a lot of people are now designing their logos and designing their graphics. So at what point do you feel that a business should hire a graphic designer?
So most of my clients that hire me, they're either just starting and they know that they don't have, they're just not an artistic mindset. They don't want to try doing it themselves. They're just ready to start their business on the right foot. The other type of person I work with is the businesses who did it all themselves, and now they've hit a point where they're growing and they need to be significantly more professional than they are. So what ends up happening is they kind of hit that magic point where they recognize that they're going to make way more money if they focus on running their business and not trying to learn how to use Canva or how to use, those do-it-yourself graphic design programs. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of that type of thing where they just kind of realize, it's my time is more valuable than what it would cost me to have it done professionally.
Okay.
So when that happens, then I typically take over.
So when they're looking for the right graphic designer, what are some questions that they should ask before hiring one?
So a huge thing with graphic design industry is there's a lot of people with zero training who, having done, they've taken a do-it-yourself course online, or they've just Googled things. And that's great. That's great if you're doing it for your own purposes. But there's whether it's the actual art theory or, the tools and all of that, and standards of practice. So there's a lot of that type of stuff is huge to know that your graphic designer knows what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And because there's so many do-it-yourselfers and there's not really a way to really tell, you should really be looking at their portfolio and the legitimate businesses that they've worked with, and also looking at their education and their schooling, because realistically what will take a professional a few hours will take somebody with no training infinitely longer, and you might be paying for that time.
Interesting. So in your response, you mentioned 2 things known as art theory and standards of practice. Do you mind explaining those in a little bit more detail?
Sure. So with any type of art study and that kind of thing, you learn a lot about color theory and how it affects like your target market and that kind of stuff, as well as how to recognize the trends and the colors that are popular for the seasons and all that kind of stuff. And you learn how to pick all the proper that kind of stuff. And you learn how to pick all the proper information for the colors so that it's consistent across all of the branding. And there's a lot of that type of education where it's industry standard. But if you've never actually participated in the education side of the industry, you're not going to necessarily know that information.
Oh.
And you don't know what you don't know, right? So as far as graphic design goes, there's lots of things you can Google anything, but you don't know to Google how colors make clients feel. And you don't know to Google, the accessibility information for PDFs and what you need if you're making online things. Like if you don't know to Google that, you're never going to know it. So when you go with somebody who hasn't had any formal training, they don't necessarily know. They don't know what they don't know,
right?
Which is kind of what it boils down to. So, and don't get me wrong, a lot of them are very talented as far as the graphic side goes, but there are those things that from a business standpoint are more important than just sheer talent, right? And that's just unfortunately the way it is, especially in the graphic design industry and a lot in the photography industry too. There's a lot of people who do the whole, well, anyone can be a designer if they have Adobe Photoshop, right? So there's a lot of that type of thing where it's the industry is kind of getting lowballed by people who have done it for like a month and they're like, oh, I'm a graphic designer. I took a YouTube course and now I'm going to do it professionally. So then they charge significantly less than a professional designer would. And it's not a sustainable business model for them. So it doesn't work well for the industry to have that low level of standards, because then when that $50 logo is the same as everybody else's $50 logo, because you don't have that quality and you don't have that, that standard in there, then you end up with that person who paid the $50 for the logo going, oh crap, everyone else has this and now it's no good for my business anymore. So then they end up having to pay again to get it done professionally.
Yeah.
It's unfortunately like something that comes up fairly often where they come back after having already hired another designer.
Yeah.
And I feel bad about that.
You brought up a lot of good points mentioning that. And that's kind of like how I felt about writing and then writing for other people, because I felt people were charging significantly less. And then like the quality of the content wasn't as great. So then when I would give out my prices, people would be like, that's too expensive. But again, like they don't realize the amount of work that goes into putting in, decent quality content. So I
exactly
feel for you.
Well, and part of it too is being able, so typically what I do when I'm having a consultation with a client, I encourage them to go and talk to like 3 or 4 other designers. And I have a list of other designers I refer them to go talk to as well, because there's such a difference in style and in, like personality and all that kind of stuff. And when you're doing something as personal as working on somebody's business brand, it has to be, my main thing is working with small business owners, and their business is their entire life. So I need to get along with them really well on a personal level as well as a professional level, because what I'm doing is so personal to them. So I need to get along with them really well on a personal level as well as a professional level, because what I'm doing is so personal to them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I recommend that they go and they talk to other designers and they make sure that like I don't ever get hired by somebody who's like, oh, I guess I'll use you. When my clients hire me, they're like, I'm so excited to work with you, because they've already done their research. They've checked out the competition. They've looked at my portfolio. We've had a conversation. And by the time they decide to do it, they're ready to invest because they know what I'm bringing to the table is the best of what they've looked at.
Right.
And the best for their business. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes I'll have a consultation with them and I'll be like, you know what, I think maybe you should go talk to these other people as well, because their style is more similar to what you're looking for. And that works beautifully too. So I've had a lot of like really good relationship with other graphic designers where it's like, you know what, I'm going to send you over to her because she kind of, you know what I mean? This is her realm. And like, that works really well too. Cause in my mind, there's not really competition because everyone has such a different style. It's like with art, there's obviously huge differences in what you personally prefer.
So I'm just curious as to, you mentioned about like color trends and popular colors. So for this year, 2019, what would you say are the popular colors?
Well, the big color for the color of the year through Pantone is the coral. And that is like super fun because it's like nice and bright and summery. But the best part about the color trends is they're all released like a year and a half in advance. So if you went to like Pantone.com, they have all of the color theories, the color trends for fashion and interior design and all of those things. And they put them out a year in advance. when they write their color, like their color trends or whatever, that's what then goes out to the fashion industry. And that's what they design all the clothes for the next year off of. So it ends up being like, it's not even really like us designers that have to go, well, these are going to be the in colors. There's like an entire organization that tells us what's going to be popular and what's going to be in the mainstream media. So it's, you know what I mean? Sure, there's definitely trendy things that come up where I'm like, ooh, that's fun. But as far as like the color theory behind that goes, like they release it and they say, this is what's coming out next year. This is what the big colors are going to be. These are what the fashion houses are using to design their collections for the fall and the winter. Like that stuff's already out. It takes months and months to manufacture clothing, right? So like they let you know ahead of time. It's really like, it's super easy as far as that goes. But being able to like put them together, and a big part of, as nice as it is to know the trends, you can't design your business off of the trends because they change. And I've had so many clients who are, you know, they come and they're dead set on, they want marble and rose gold. And then 6 months later, they were like, okay, it's everywhere. Why is it everywhere? And it's like, because it was a trend. And now the trend is everywhere, and then the trend's going to go away, and your brand, you know what I mean? And then your brand is not on, it's not that it's bad on trending. So I try to steer people away from the stuff that's really trendy and get something that's a little more solid and more timeless and that can actually grow with their brand, especially as their business grows. A lot of people might end up needing, you know, secondary logos or complementary things for different programs or different, you know, different branches of their business as they grow.
Right.
So being able to build in the logo that kind of goes with that is huge.
That's awesome. So let's talk about print quality. Does it actually matter?
Yes, it matters for sure.
Okay.
There's a very big difference. So for me, I find print, like there's all the whole thing like, oh, well, print is dying. Print is dying as far as like putting flyers in a mailbox go, in my opinion. When was the last time you took out a flyer out of the mailbox and read it instead of throwing it in the recycling bin?
Oh, it's automatic, always in the recycling.
It's always automatic. So the only time I find that works is if you are in that, if you're dealing with homeowners, like if you're specifically selling like lawn cutting or, you know what I mean, things like that. Because they'll sometimes read it, but 90% of the time it's going in the recycling. So I try to urge clients not to do that, but the quality does matter. Like if you're picking up, depends on who your client is. Like if you're dealing with higher executive business, like businesses and business people, the quality of your print hugely matters, because you go to a networking event and they end up with 20 business cards in their pocket. Does yours feel nicer? Does it look nicer? Is the color actually your brand color? Is your, like the print quality there really matters, because your business card is essentially competing with all the other business cards in their pocket. And the same kind of goes with like flyers. People are very visual and they're very like textile, right? So if you pick up a card that has a little bit more weight to it and it has a nice lamination, or it's, you know what I mean? You have that perceived value of it where it's like, okay, well, even if it's not super expensive, it's still that, well, this is nicer than that piece of 14-point basic uncoated stuff that I got. Right? Like it just gives you that different feel where you're like, okay, this is a little more expensive. This card is more expensive. This is a little more expensive. This card is more expensive. Therefore, the value of this business, therefore, like, you know what I mean? She must be doing well. She can afford such fancy cards. Yeah. And it's not even necessarily the case, but.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Like all the business cards I have, like I really like the feel of it, and like the ones that are of like a thicker cardstock, I've just like got a really good impression. Like, yeah, this seems solid. Like this seems like a solid, strong person.
Well, and a solid business too, right? Yeah. Like it's weird that that's how we work, but as humans, like we want that weight. We want to feel like, okay, this card has substance. Like therefore that business must have something good going for them, right?
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to know, as you know, being a creative entrepreneur, you're constantly designing, constantly like creating. Do you find it hard, like, or do you ever feel like under pressure to create things like under specific deadlines? And like, do you ever get that?
Oh my God, yes. 100 times, yes. Right now is probably the most personal stuff. And then I have my first employee starting soon.
Awesome.
But she's not starting until the end of the month. So I'm kind of in that whole, like, can you please just start earlier? Now would be great, but it's in the process of ramping it up so I have enough work for her. I'm kind of in that whole, like, okay, well, I'm going to just buckle down and I have a good amount of time. So it's just, yeah, there are definitely those days where it's like, oh, okay, how am I going to get it all out? And there's definitely been nights where you do the whole, like, pull an all-nighter just to meet your deadlines. And that's part of running a business, but it's worth it. So I can't really complain.
So, what are some common misconceptions about branding? And then, what are some mistakes you find that business owners make when it comes to branding?
So there are so many people that think that branding is just your logo. They're like, I need my brand developed. They're like, I need my brand developed. And then you talk about, brand development and all of that stuff. And they're like, okay, but how much for just the logo? And then you have to explain the whole process. But realistically, I don't do just logos anymore. I will not ever just make a single logo and not provide branding standards of, okay, these are the fonts you're going to use and the colors and the spacing for your logo and all of that kind of stuff. Just because I feel like avoiding that and doing just the logo kind of sets them up for failure. Because then they have to figure all that stuff out on their own. And if you're trying to build a business that has the backup or you know what I mean, the weight behind it to actually keep the brand consistent, you have to give them the tools to do that.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of people think that their brand is just their logo, and it's really not. Like, your brand is your voice, your vision, and your visuals. And the visuals is such a small part of it when you're thinking large picture branding.
Right.
The amount of people that come to get their logo done and they're not really sure who their target market is. They're not sure, they don't have a mission, vision, values yet. They're not sure what their business is even really doing, except, I make cups or t-shirts or whatever it is. But the actual background information of who their business is and what their business does isn't really there yet. So when I do logo development, I always do a really in-depth branding consultation with them to just figure out okay, well, where are you in your business plan? Do you have a business plan? Do you have a strategy? Do you have all that kind of stuff? And if they don't have a strategy and they don't have a plan and all that kind of stuff, then I typically end up sending them to Jillian at Hijinks. Come back when you know what you want.
First go see her, then go
First
see me.
Go see her and then come see me. But it's tricky because there's a lot of people who it's new, right? It's a hard thing to start a business, and you might be spectacular at whatever your business is, but the actual running a business is a whole other can of worms.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So trying to find out where to do that is kind of tricky.
So you have something really exciting that you're working on. You're in the process of designing a soon-to-be released book called Average Girl, A Guide to Loving Your Body. Are you able to share what the book is about and how you came up with the cover design?
I'm working with Emily Dick. So she's a photographer local to Burlington, and she's written this book, and it's absolutely fantastic. And what it is it covers, it's a whole guide for young women and teens and all that kind of stuff on how to love their body the way that their body is. So she covers absolutely everything from, the mental health side of it, eating disorders, and the pressure to just feel as media expects you to feel.
Right.
So, and in the process of her writing the book, she photographed hundreds of women for this book, every different type of body, lifestyle. And she talked to them about what they thought about their bodies and societal expectations on beauty and all of that kind of thing. So through that, she's written this beautiful book and provided all these gorgeous pictures. And it's such a cool thing to be involved in. And just doing the layout and the covering and all of that for it is really, really super great. Cause I have an 11-year-old, right? So I'm reading this and I'm like, all right, I need at least one for every girl in my daughter's school. And just pass them out. It's amazing. The one thing I find really great about it and about her whole perspective is the whole body positivity thing is a really huge thing right now. It's a really it's super trendy, which is, thank God. That has to happen. But the big thing that I find is there's zero shame put on anyone's thought process or anyone's idea of beauty. A lot of the body positive books and stuff like that, there's almost an underlying bit of positive books and stuff like that. There's almost an underlying bit of well, if you've had plastic surgery or if you've gotten tattoos or if you have hair extensions or whatever, then you're not loving your body.
Oh.
So in this, I am finding it amazing that in Emily's writing and stuff, there's nothing in there that devalues anybody. It's literally, you are beautiful regardless of anything. However you decide you want to be, it's beautiful. And that to me is it's just fantastic. I just love how inclusive, which obviously it should be.
So with respect to the design, did you find it was a different process with respect to like, designing logos and cards and
Oh, hugely.
websites?
So she already had she kind of already had a brand in the sense that she kind of knew what colors she wanted. She knew, obviously all her photos had been taken. So she somewhat of a feel to
Right.
how she wanted it. So it was really, to life. Like she had done up a bunch of like mock-ups and like that kind of stuff. So it was kind of like, well, I think this is kind of how I want it. But then for me to actually be able to like take it and run with it was fantastic. It's been a really big process. This is my first like full length book that I've ever laid out. I've laid out lots of like manuals and like training and like small books and like ebooks and stuff, but this is the first like full out hardcover thing that I've ever laid out, and it's spectacular. Like it's such a fun process,
Oh,
especially because it's just so well written. So like even as I'm editing it, I'm kind of reading it as I'm editing it, and then so every time I close the project, I'm like I have all the warm fuzzies. I'm like, ooh, like that was good. Like it's soul work. It's really great.
that's awesome. You'll have to let me know when it comes out so I can also let the listeners know. This
Yeah,
sounds
so
like
you
an
can.
amazing book.
She does have them open for pre-order. Just love average for pre-order. Just loveaverage.com. And there's all kinds of great stuff on there. There's a blog. She's got information on the book coming. And then she has an Instagram where she like has been posting like the photos of all of the girls that she's taken pictures of and like their little quotes and stuff.
Cool. All right. So, for those of you who don't know, actually, Beth, she appeared on the Making the Bacon blog interview series. So, I just want to kind of revisit one of the questions. You mentioned that you were you still are very competitive. And how has the competition mindset helped you with your business? And then, say, if you've also obviously like encountered like any struggles within your business, how have you found like being competitive help?
So it's funny. I'm competitive in the sense that I'm normally competitive with myself, which is kind of funny. But the way that I find it grows my business is I'll look at my last month. Like now that I've been in business a year, I'll look at last year and be like, okay, where am I sitting? Now that my business has grown, how much more should I be doing? Because realistically, when you're in your first month of business, you're kind of just like, I didn't have a business strategy then. I didn't have a marketing strategy. I didn't really have any of that until December. So I just kind of flew by the seat of my pants for the first year. And now that I have like solid plans, I can do that whole, okay, well, where am I going to be? What am I going to do? And how much better can I make my business for myself? And I find the competitive side of it is not so much competition against other designers because like I said, it's a very personal kind of thing for business owners to pick. And I'm definitely not going to be the right person for everybody. But the competitive level in like just in business in general, like I have a brother who owns a construction company and he does fantastic with it. But with it, it was like when I quit my day job, it was because I was kind of baited by saying, oh, well, your baby brother is doing it. Your baby brother's doing it. He's doing it really well. So like, what are you doing? And then I quit my job because I was like, well, if my baby brother's doing it, I better do it too. And that's like, for me, like that's super motivating to be able to say like, okay, this is what I'm doing and we're going to run with it. And then being able to like drive myself through that to be like, okay, well, I didn't get my month this month, but I'm going to do twice as much next. Like I'm very good at like self-motivating.
Right.
And like, if you're running a business by yourself, you 100% have to do that. Like nobody else is telling you what to do.
Exactly. Okay, so what is one thing that you have learned recently that you can share with listeners? Any final words of advice?
Well, I took the biggest thing that I've done for my business, and like it sounds funny to like just be on a podcast and plugging somebody else, but I took Jillian's like Bliss course, which it stands for Business and Life Inevitable Success Strategy. And it literally puts how much you want to work on your business, what you want your business to do. And it builds necessarily have, we're not working a bazillion hours with no strategy. So each week I have like 5 things I have to do to grow my business. And like 5 things to do a week is nothing, right? Like it's super attainable.
Yeah.
And you build it knowing, okay, well, I'm only going to be able to work. Like realistically, when my kids are at school, that's when I have time to work. So I'm going to build my whole business strategy planning on me only working 6 hours a day. Realistically, I always work more than that, but it gives me a way for me to grow my business without having to, you know what I mean, spend endless hours deciding what to do. So that was huge. Like that, like get a strategy is super big. And as far as branding, like the biggest advice that I would have is recognize the amount of time that you're spending on it and the amount of time you're spending on your graphics and your postcards and your print, and look at what that's costing you in time. Like, yes, you will always be able to find like a 50% off coupon for Vistaprint to get your business cards done. But how long does it take you to design your cards? And how long does it take you to deal with them and get it shipped? And you know what I mean? Like all of that. If you look at the amount of time that takes you, and you're realizing you're spending way more time on that than you are on running your business, then you should just call me.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? Like that's kind of like a big point for a lot of people, is when they get to the point that their business is better spent running their business than it is doing whatever else they're trying to do. Because we're business owners, we all think we can do everything. But whether we should or not is a whole other thing.
Yeah, it's like superhero syndrome.
Yeah, exactly.
So where can people find you?
So I am online everywhere at Beth M. Woodward. So whether it's my website, bethamwoodward.com, or any social media platform, it's always the same handle, Beth M. Woodward. I'm always there. Or you can come hang out in the Small Business Owners of Southern Ontario Facebook group, and you can ask pretty much anything. And there'll be, 2,700 people listening who can hopefully help you too.
Awesome. So thank you so much for taking your time. It was really great chatting with you.
You too.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Bacon Bits and Bytes podcast. If you enjoyed the content, please subscribe, leave a review on iTunes, and share this podcast with your family and friends. You can follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Bacon Bits and Bytes. And on Twitter, it's baconbits_bytes. Ciao for now.